What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm here to bring you the Season 3, Episode 14 review of The Walking Dead, entitled Prey. This episode was... it was just a little... Scale of 1 to 10... 4.5. If I was being generous, I'd say 6, but it's probably more like 4.5. I'm not feeling in a very generous mood right now. So, if I had to give you a one-sentence description of this episode, a 1-hour chase scene. That's pretty much what this episode was. A 1-hour chase scene. We were on the road, in a forest, in a field, in an abandoned building, just a 1-hour chase scene. You can imagine if you'd paid money to see this in the movie theater, you'd be very, very unhappy. I will say this, the episode overall was probably a little lame, but there are some good signs on the horizon for both. Well, I won't say next week's upcoming episode, because that one doesn't look like it's going to be too hot either. But for the season finale, and hopefully going into Season 4, looks like there's some good signs on the horizon. So, basically what happens in this episode is, to give you a brief summary, Andrea manages, I guess you can say manages, she finally escapes from Woodbury. But the governor tracks her down, hunts her down, captures her, brings her back to Woodbury, and from the looks of things of the closing scene of this week's episode, doesn't look like good things are in store for Andrea. To put it mildly, doesn't look like good things are in store for her. So, this review, I'm going to break it down into the bad and the good. Because like I said, this episode overall was a little bit lame, but there are some good signs on the horizon. So first, let me just get the bad out of the way. I'm really having a difficult time both understanding as a reviewer and believing as a member of the audience that the characters in this show can be this gullible. I don't believe it. I understand that an important aspect of the governor's characterization is his ability to manipulate people, to get other people to trust him, to play the role of the demagogue, someone who gains your trust, who lures you in, and is really not the person you think that he is. So I understand that in order to make the governor out to be the big bad, for those of you who know that kind of lingo, big bad is generally someone who plays the role of the antagonist or the villain for an entire season, a recurring villain, basically. Although it can be adapted into other mediums, not just for TV. But yeah, so in order to build up the governor as the big bad, I understand that his ability to manipulate people is an important aspect of his characterization. And we've seen him do this to Andrea. Goodness gracious, have we seen him do this to Andrea. We've seen him do this to Rick when he tried to manipulate Rick. And I think not even tried, but kind of successfully did that in the last episode, where he brought up Rick's dead wife, and he used that as a point of relatability between himself and Rick, because the governor also, his wife also died. So he tried to bring that up as a point of emphasis in order to connect with Rick, in order to manipulate him, to get him to do what he wanted him to do. And now in this episode, we've seen that with Tyrese. And at some point, you just have to wonder about the gullibility of these characters. And the major problem I see with this is that this character trait for the governor isn't written very well. And here's what I mean by that. Sometimes you can see how the governor is manipulating people. A good example of that is Rick from last week's episode, when he did it to Rick. But on the other hand, a lot of the times it just seems like the governor isn't good at manipulating people so much as these people are just gullible and stupid. Really stupid. And it's inexplicable to me. So I'll give you an example of this. In this week's episode, we get to see a little bit of Tyrese, although he still is pretty much a disposable background character. But in any event, we see on 3 separate occasions some red flags go up for Tyrese, and we see that he's just not able to understand what's going on. The first red flag is from Andrea. When Andrea leaves Woodbury, and she tells Tyrese, the governor's not who you think he is. He's crazy, he's evil, and if you had a brain in your head, you would come along with me and get the hell out of here. That's the first red flag. Second red flag. Martinez and the other henchmen of the governor take Tyrese and Sasha and also another member of that Tyrese's group out to a place and shows them the walker pits, where they have the walkers kind of caged up inside this paddy wagon type vehicle, and there's some more walkers inside of a pit. And Tyrese is like, what are you planning on doing with all these walkers? And then Martinez is like, yeah, those people at the prison who we're beefing with, we're just going to feed them to the walkers. What the fuck? Any person in that situation would probably be like, what the hell is going on? And like I said, they show him the walker pit, and Martinez explicitly tells him what they're about to do with these walkers. But at the end of the episode, the governor comes along, and he's just like, oh, that's just Martinez. He doesn't trust you, so he didn't explain to you very well what we're gonna do. We're not gonna really feed these people to the walkers. We're just gonna scare them a little bit. And without even questioning the governor, Tyrese just says, okay, I can go with that. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. By the way, I like you, governor. I like what you're doing here. And that bitch Andrea, yeah, she was crazy. And yeah, I trust you, and I want to stay in Woodbury. I'm like, what the hell? No. That's a little bit too gullible. I understand that the governor's supposed to be manipulative, but you're not supposed to be able to manipulate people to that extent. So, it's kind of ridiculous when people see right with their own eyes what's going on, and someone tells them what's going on, and then the governor swoops in and says, nah, it's not really like that, and they just say, okay, yeah, I believe you. So this sort of strains the suspension of disbelief of the viewer, because you have to say, with all these warning signs, the characters should know what's up. They should kind of understand what's going on here. And the same thing with Andrea. On one hand, you're saying, yeah, the governor is a manipulative SOB, but on the other hand, Jesus Christ, how many times did people tell Andrea about this? How many warning signs did she need to realize what's going on here? So I really don't understand the character's willingness to trust whatever the governor says and take it at face value. That just doesn't make sense to me. And like I said, the same thing happened to Andrea. She got warning signs from Michonne. She found out that the governor was lying about a whole host of things. Michonne told her at one point that the governor sent his henchmen, including Merle, after me. He was going to kill me, and if you came along with me, he was going to kill you too. And then after Andrea learns about Maggie, she still goes back to Woodbury with the governor. So at one point you got to say, yeah, come on, the governor's manipulative, but damn, he's not Jesus Christ here. Come on, he's not that persuasive. And another thing that doesn't make sense to me with respect to Andrea is, why did she go back to Woodbury? Even after learning everything that she knows about the governor, why did she go back to Woodbury? And what's even more inexplicable is, why does she have a complete 180? I mean, last week it was, I'm going to negotiate peace and I'm going to be a United Nations diplomat. And in this episode, she completely flips. In one episode? And it couldn't have been, and remember, the governor told Rick that you have to hand Michonne over to me within 2 days. So this had to happen within at least the last day. Couldn't even, it been 2 days, and all of a sudden she's done a complete 180. Just out of the blue. So for 13 episodes of this season, through her learning everything that she now knows about the governor, she refused to do anything to go against the governor. And now we get to episode 14, and all of a sudden it's, now I gotta take out the governor. And the Milton scene was just ridiculous. It was ridiculously stupid. Not the least of which was because of how ironic it was. So Milton comes to Andrea, the scientist from Woodbury, and he has some revelations about the governor. He's shown Andrea that the governor has made some sort of torture chair for Michonne, because this is how bad the governor wants Michonne. And Andrea is finally about to kill the governor, about to take him out, and Milton stops her. And then Andrea turns to Milton and she says, "How can you still protect him?" Really? I mean, we could have said that when you found out everything you found out about the governor and you were still trying to negotiate peace with him. Why were you still trying to protect the governor? That was just ironic and just a stupid scene. And it seems like the writers dropped the ball there, because if they were paying attention to what they were writing, they would realize the irony of that situation, of Andrea turning to Milton and saying, "Why are you still protecting him?" Hello. Really doesn't make any sense. Also, and this whole gullibility thing and the whole governor being manipulative and getting people to do what he wants them to do, I think this is just a larger symptom of what's wrong with the governor's character. And I've said this, you've heard me say this many times before. The governor is not supposed to be manipulating people like this. He's supposed to be in your face, explicit, because it's a freaking horror show. I mean, the governor needs to do more. In order for me to take him seriously, and for me as a viewer to treat him as the villain that the writers want him to be, he has to do more than manipulate stupid people. I mean, it seems like the horror of the governor would consist in more than his ability to manipulate stupid and gullible people. Second thing I gotta talk about that deals with the bad of this episode: the filler. The filler and the fluff. The writers, and I hope that Gimple takes care of this when he takes over as showrunner for season 4. They absolutely have to do something about all the filler and unnecessary fluff in these 1-hour episodes. It's just too much. The episodes are just too slow paced. And it seems to me that the formula of The Walking Dead, at least so far as the 3rd season goes, is we'll have 4 to 5 episodes of very, very slow paced, not very much action, punctuated by 1 or 2 episodes of intense action. So 4 to 5 episodes of just filler nonsense, and then 1 or 2 episodes where the plot progresses a lot and there's a lot of intense action. And it really shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't be that way. And because you have to space it out. You have to do more with the pacing. Otherwise, you get what you got in these last 2 episodes. The last episode, we saw Rick and the governor drinking brandy or whiskey or whatever it was, and pretty much talking about stuff no one cared about. This episode, an hour-long chase scene. It's just too much filler and fluff. And you really have to question the writing when you see somebody being chased in what's supposed to be a horror show, a post-apocalyptic survivalist zombie horror show. And this person is being chased for an hour straight. Just being chased. I mean, we see Andrea running on the road. Then we see Andrea hiding in the forest. Then we see Andrea hiding in the field. And by the way, how the hell did the governor find her in that field? I mean, when Andrea gets down, she's laying down flat on her stomach so that the governor can't see her. And the governor, I mean, he didn't even zigzag. He made a beeline straight for her. And I'm like, come on. Not only is this a bunch of filler nonsense, but it's predicated on a contrived plot device as well. How in the hell did the governor find Andrea? How did he even know which route she took to get to the prison? None of that even made sense to me. So we see Andrea running on the road, Andrea hiding in the forest, Andrea hiding in the field. Then we see Andrea running and hiding in an abandoned building. I mean, for an hour straight. Really? That's just, I mean, that's come on now. That's really stretching my patience. And then we got to see the other unnecessary nonsense fluff with Tyrese and Sasha. That stuff was just obvious filler as well. I mean, because why have all of this build up to Tyrese potentially not trusting the governor for us to get to the end of the episode, and then the governor comes in and says, no, that's not how it was. And then Tyrese says, yeah, you're right, I trust you. Because, I mean, it's obvious that was filler. You don't build up a subplot for an entire episode just to discard it at the end. Really silly. So now let's get to the good of this episode. And, you know, despite what I've said thus far about the episode, there was some good, or at least some foreshadowing of some good to come. Let's put it that way. I will say that I'm starting just a little bit, just a smidgen. I'm starting to like the governor's character. He was more assertive. I mean, he did some stuff that still made me question whether or not we'll ever see him become the villain that I want him to become and that he was in the comic books. But he is showing some signs of improvement. But, you know, overall he's still a pussy character, but starting to look promising is the gist of it. And this started with the flashback at the beginning of the episode, which was, I actually liked the way they did that flashback at the beginning of the episode. That was very, very nice. To tie something related to Michonne from the past to the governor in the present to sort of give us some foreshadowing of the future. That was very, very nicely done from a narrative standpoint. So in the flashback, we see Michonne and Andrea, and they're sitting down in the forest. This is before they got to Woodbury, obviously. And Andrea is questioning Michonne about the walkers. Why does she always have these walkers with her? And I will say this, though. This could have been a great moment of characterization for Michonne, but the writers just completely dropped the ball. We could have found out about the walkers, who they were, how they were connected to Michonne, how that impacted Michonne, what her emotions were, but nope, we don't see that. She was silent. In fact, throughout the whole flashback, I don't think she ever said more than 5 words. Pretty much silent and stoic. So, in the comic books, her characterization, as I've mentioned before, is done better, because we actually find out who the walkers were and how they impacted her, what her connection was, and how we see how she constantly has to deal with that trauma. In the TV show, I'm going to get none of that. In any event, if you remember, the walkers that Michonne had she always kept them pretty much chained to her, and they were also chained to each other. And it looks like, I'm not certain about this, but it certainly looks like the chains that Michonne was using to hold her walkers is the chain that the governor has. And he's going to use those chains, presumably, on Michonne when he gets her in the exchange. And boy, that's some kind of irony, and that is pretty good writing. That's pretty good writing. To use those chains which Michonne had and used on her walkers as a symbol of the governor's obsession and need for revenge against Michonne, and how that can be used as a catalyst for the further transformation of the governor's character into the villain that I want him to be, into the real big bad that he's supposed to be in this horror show. That was pretty good writing. That I must say that I was pretty impressed by that. And it also got me very, very excited for the future, because I won't spoil anything for you guys, but those chains could be foreshadowing a very iconic confrontation between the governor and Michonne that happened in the comic books, and I just cannot wait to see if this plays out. If this plays out, this will be awesome. If it doesn't, then the governor will, still be that pussy character. But but in any event, because of the way the governor has Michonne's chains and the torture chair that he set up, and the sort of whole situation that we were shown in this episode, with Milton talking about how obsessed the governor is with Michonne and how he wants to exact revenge on Michonne, this pretty much leads me to believe that Rick will in fact hand over Michonne to the governor. That is not just talk, that he's going to walk the walk. And let me say this now, though. If they do not execute this perfectly, and by perfectly I mean if they do not use Michonne being handed over to the governor as a catalyst for the exploration of the dark side of the governor's character, I'm going to go apeshit. I'm really going to go apeshit. First of all, I'm already not happy about the whole turning Michonne over to the governor situation to begin with. But I'll sleep better at night if this becomes the sort of prelude to that iconic confrontation that we saw in the comic books between the governor and Michonne. But if that happens, it will completely change the nature of the relationship between Michonne and Rick. Now that I'm thinking about it. This could be getting interesting, ladies and gentlemen. This could be getting very, very interesting. Alright, so another good sign that we saw for the transformation of the governor's character is those walker pits. Now, I must say that I never believed for a second that the writers, because the writers have been so scared and timid, and things have been so censored. I mean, pretty much all of the controversial violence in the comic books has been censored out of the TV show. So I never believed for a second that they would actually have the governor feed somebody to the walkers and actually show that. But it does lead you to believe that they have darker things in store for the governor's character. So, that could be another good sign on the horizon. Another good sign. The last thing that looks like it's going to be good for the governor's characterization in the future is Andrea about to get the treatment? And that's putting it mildly. Looks like Andrea is about to get worked over, if you know what I mean. And this was pretty much that closing scene of Andrea in the torture chair. That's my new name for that. The torture chair. I don't know if was she handcuffed. I think she was handcuffed, or her hands were tied behind her back, and she was strapped to the chair, and with that gag over her mouth. That was the best part of the episode for me, because I'm really waiting to see. I'm really waiting to see what the governor does to Andrea in next week's episode. Hopefully it'll be next week's episode, or at least, well, I hope it's not the season finale, because if it gets pushed to the season finale, that would be kind of an anticlimactic season finale. But that remains to be seen. in any event, I'm just hoping that the governor works Andrea over. And this what the governor does to Andrea, what the governor does to a person who's helpless, completely under his power, this will tell us all we need to know about the direction in which the writers will take the governor's character. Because if he doesn't do anything to Andrea, and by anything, I mean, if it's not so bad, maybe if he, if it's the usual, I'm going to rough you up, punch you in the face type of stuff, threaten to rape you type of stuff, then we'll say, well, okay, it's just going to be more of the same old, same old. But if he goes ham on Andrea, because he's got her in the torture chair, and he's got all his tools laid out, I'm talking about Dexter style. If he goes to work on Andrea, this would greatly fix the horror deficit of the show in this third season. It would be awesome. And to use that scenario as a catalyst for his transformation and as the exploration of his darker side that we see in the comics, that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm also, of course, hoping for Andrea to have a very ignominious death, if you will, to put it that way, because Andrea as a character sucks and she needs to die. It's pretty much that's the short of it. Other thoughts on this episode before I close out? Definitely big thumbs up for Tyrese and Sasha being completely useless and unimportant characters. My silence is a visual metaphor for the silence of Tyrese and Sasha in the Walking Dead show. Do a little performative metaphor, if you will. They suck, man. We don't know anything about them. No character development, no characterization. And the stuff that they got in this episode, like I said, was useless because there was this whole subplot being built up about how they could possibly mistrust the governor and start to question him. But that all got discarded at the end of the episode when the governor came in and they were like, yeah, we trust you. Thumbs up, we trust you. So at least since Tyrese and Sasha were introduced and right before the mid-season hiatus, they haven't done shit. Nothing. The only thing they've done is get saved by Rick, kicked out of the prison, and seduced by the governor. That's pretty much what their plot line encompasses. So yeah, I'm definitely having high expectations for the governor's character now, based on the setup in this episode and the fact that Andrea is now in the torture chair. I have very high expectations for the governor's character. And I just can't wait to see what they do with him. But for next week's episode, based on the sort of previews that I've seen for next week's episode, we're going back to the prison, and that doesn't look too appetizing. If I could be allowed to use that word in this way. It just looks like it's going to be some more boring stuff about Rick trying to convince everybody to hand over Michonne and whatever. I'm much more interested in the governor now. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.